Shalom Aleichem and welcome. Today is Yom Revi'i Shabbat, Wednesday, Kaf Daled Bishvat, Toshin Pei Well, according to our calendar, the 11th of February 2026, according to the Gregorian calendar. And we continue in Sefer Yirmiyahu. We are in Perek, as I recall, Perek Shishi, Pasuk Kaf Bet. Ko Omar Adonai. Thus states Hashem. Hine, Am ba me'aretz Tzafon, v'roi gadol, Yaor mi'al kithei aretz. This is one of the many warnings that Yirmiyahu made in the ears of the Jewish people in Mamlechet Yehuda, the kingdom of Judah. At this time, we're talking approximately 2,600 years ago. And he says, Hashem tells me and informs therefore you, Am ba me'aretz Tzafon, and also adds after a ta'am, mafsik, in other words, which is an end or a break in the pasuk me'aretz Tzafon. It says v'roi gadol yaor mi'al kithei aretz. The Malbim therefore explains the Am is in the first place the Bavlim, who are the leaders and the head of this empire. But an empire, of course, always incorporates many subsets. The largest set of the Babylonian Empire includes many subsets, many minor nations and associates and allies. So the Goy Gadol refers to, according to the Malbim, to the entire collection of all the huge number of soldiers and military power that will come up together against Yerushalayim. Ye'or will rise up, or will be risen up, as the Radak explains. Let us have a look at the Radak. The Radak says, Ani hu ha'me'irotho, I am he who awakens them, in other words, who causes them to rise up and come against you. Lavo mi Bavel al Yerushalayim, because Bavel is, when all is said and done, is not next door. Eretz Rehoka. It's quite a way away. Ulo yeh bilti he'ara. In other words, such things don't happen without me making it happen. So this is a general rule of thumb for us to keep in mind at all times, that Hashem is He who causes such major events to occur, and this is true for all major historical events, and even those that seem to us to be minor historical events. And often we're incorrect about what is minor and what is major. What may appear to be minor at first works out to be something much, much more significant. And I'm causing them to come up against you. All right, we continue. Pasuk Kaf Gimel. You can see correctly where I'm pointing? Yeah. Keshet v'chidon yahaziku. In other words, this is a great military force. They will have bows and arrows. Keshet is a bow. Chidon is a spear. Yahaziku. They have in their hands, and they are very proficient in the use of these things. Achzarihu. They are very cruel. V'lo yirachemu. They will show no mercy. Kolam kayam yahemeh. The sound of the army moving is like the sound of the ocean, a huge, irresistible sound and force. And they come against you on horses. They are coming up against you to make war against you. Bath Sion. Bath Sion is a term referring to the Jewish people in Eretz Yehuda, the center of which is Sion, Yerushalayim. Horses were a sign of political and military power, particularly large numbers of horses. For instance, Eretz Yehuda Mamlechet Yehuda, the kingdom of Judah at this time, probably had some horses, but not huge numbers, probably, from what I understand. So, horses in large numbers, large mounted cavalry forces, etc., were a sign of great power. Usually, only the largest empires could afford and maintain such things. Pasuk Kaf Dalet. Shamanu eth sham'u rafu yadenu. We have heard about these people, and we have heard tell of their moving towards us. In other words, this is already describing a time when apparently there is information, there is intelligence that the enemy is on its way. Rafu yadenu, and our hands are weak. In other words, we're shaking in our boots. Lara hezikafnu hil kayoleda. We are like a pregnant, like a woman who is about to give birth, a woman in labor. Hil kayoleda. We experience pain which we cannot overcome, which we cannot deal with. Like a woman in labor is paralyzed by that pain and by that the physical reaction of her body to what's going on inside her. And in the same way, we are neutralized. We are like a woman in labor. We're unable to do anything. We're just at the mercy of these forces. Al tesa'u hasadeh. Uvaderech lo telechu. Al telechu, I should say. Ki harev lo'oyev moror misaviv. This is Pasuk Kaf. Let us look at the Targum. This is already describing a situation where the forces, the enemy forces, are already within the land. So within the borders. In other words, do not try and hide. You will not be able to save yourself. Rabbi explains over here, as you can see. אל תעשו הסעודה, וגם בעיר, בדרך אל תלכו, רק תתחבאו שם בנקיקים וחורים. In other words, you can try and hide amongst the rocks and the hills somewhere in the Kikim. It refers to the spaces, the crevices between rocks. ומבאר אל תעשו הסעודה, כי חרב לאויב וישיגכם שם. In other words, the enemy is out and about. ובדרך אל תלכו גם בעיר כי מרור מסביב, כי הפחד והמרור כבר הוא מסביב, לדירתכם, כי מוכן לבקוע העיר. In other words, they are already surrounding the city. That is the implication. And Yirmiyahu is speaking to the people in Yerushalayim, where apparently he was at this point already. Pasuk Kavwal. Bath ami higri sak, with palashim va'efer, evel yahid asilach mispad tamrurim. In other words, you should already begin mourning. Like the morning the parents would engage in for an only child. The enemy is already amongst you. That's basically what he's saying. In other words, your time has run out. Kav Zayin, Bahon nethaticha v'ami mivthar. And you, Yirmiyahu, I have made you into I've established you as someone to take note of their behavior. As it says here, and Rashi says over here, I have established you as a powerful, as it were, pillar of iron, as it says at the beginning of Sefer Yirmiyahu that we learned. Your job is to tell them the truth, to speak the truth. To chastise them. Even though I know that they will not listen. And yet it has to be on record that you were there and you said these things to them. Bahon, Rashi explains here, Lashon Hozek. The word Bahon here means, and he brings proof from another pasuk in Yeshayahu, that Machon here refers to strength and something which cannot be overpowered. In other words, they will not be able to silence you and overpower you. And the Radak says something similar. Rashi said, Radak here says, even though it is your job to tell them unpleasant things they don't want to hear. Do not fear them. Again, this is what we find at the beginning of Sefer Yirmiyahu, if you recall. Bahon perusho mivtza. The word bahon, the Radak, similar, close to Rashi, refers to a fortress, a mivtzar. Kamo hakimu behuno. V'chen amar lo b'tchilat nubuato. This is what I referred to. Hine netaticha hayom la'ir mivtzar v'la'amud barzel. This is what Hashem said to Yirmiyahu at the very beginning. Your job will be to stand firm and speak the truth, no matter what. And this, in general, is the job of Nevi'im and true Chachamim. Chachamim are we should always understand that true Chachmei Torah are an extension of those who walk in the footsteps of the Nevi'im. The Torah of Hazal is the Torah of the Nevi'im. And a true Chacham often has to play the same role of speaking the truth, whether people want to hear it or not. As the Talmud says in Masechet Ketubot, in the Talmud Bavli, if you see the Chacham, the Rab of a town, is liked by all, that's not a good sign.
Yeah.
Because apparently he does not chastise them. He doesn't tell them what they're doing wrong. He does not try and cause them to change their ways where they need to change their ways. It's very easy to be a popular rabbi. In actual fact, people do not understand this, or maybe some people do understand this. But nevertheless, as we saw, so if you recall, at the beginning of in the previous perek, at the end. Here, the last pasuk, if you can see here, the last pasuk, Hey Lamed Aleph, Hanevim Nibel Vashaker, Wakonim Yirdu Al Yedehem, Wami Yoavu Chen, and my people like such a situation. A rabbi who doesn't tell people the truth can be very popular, and that's what people like. They're pleased to have someone who tells them that they're okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Sometimes I'll hear people will take the position that Chachamim shouldn't speak in too harsh a manner, so that they should, I guess, water down the message so that it will be accepted. These kinds of messaging, not to say a sheker, but don't say it like that. Let's say it in a way where it can be accepted. Would you say that just as a Navi is not allowed to change his message in any way, that the same applies to a Chacham, or is there a certain sense of trying to, let's say, convince or make it palatable for the masses?
The difference between a Chacham, a true Chacham, and a politician is that the Chacham's focus is on speaking truth, and a politician's focus, and usually in the kinds of political systems with which we are familiar, the politician's focus generally is to say that which will be popular, that which will be accepted, that which will garner him support, votes, what have you. Which is why politics, as we know it, is not it's not a very pleasant business, and really good people tend not to do very well in it. This is the great tragedy of what has become known, not really accurately, but what has become known as democracy. Plato already 2,000 400 years ago already stated that the problem with democracy is that generally in a democracy, the leader chosen will not be the wisest or the most honest and the most competent, but the most persuasive. The one who is able to convince people that it's worth your while to vote for me for whatever reason. It's very rare that you find this confluence of both competence and truth and powers of persuasion, the gift of the gab, or call it what you like. They join somehow and create a generally a very unique phenomenon in political life, and that's why mostly that's usually not what happens, and that's why one reason at least, perhaps the main reason, that Plato was not a Democrat, didn't believe in democracy as a system, and that's why I believe all wise people should understand that that's not a system that can actually work and achieve the right results, the desired results, and that most of the time it's an exercise in deception, in a lack of honesty, lack of transparency, and all kinds of goings on and shenanigans. And anyone who listens to the news and follows various current affairs will be aware, as we speak today, will be aware of huge tranches of information to do with this despicable individual, Jeffrey Epstein, and all his cronies and his connections and everything. And we now know, we hear that it is spreading like a cancer across the globe. It's about perhaps to topple the British Prime Minister as we speak, etc., etc. So what's going on here? You're talking about networks of evildoers who know how to play the system and take advantage of it, and it's all under the guise of democracy. So that has to do that. That's enough said with regards to the facade of democracy. A Chacham, a Navi, a Rav must be focused on speaking the truth. There are two aspects to speaking the truth. One is what you referred to, what you alluded to, which is how you express yourself. How do you speak to the audience that you are addressing? So you can, it's true, you don't have to always say things in the most, in a manner which is calculated to cause the largest degree of consternation and upset and opposition. You don't have to speak in that fashion. This is one of my criticisms of certain people. I won't mention names, certain politicians from the past and the present, and certain Rabbanim perhaps as well, who express themselves in ways which are not very well considered, shall we say. But choosing your words carefully and aiming for the greatest possible impact on your audience does not mean that you can speak anything but the truth. If, in order to achieve that, you go light on the truth, heavy on persuasive powers and impressive oratory and what have you, and pushing certain buttons which make people happy. But if this is accompanied by going very light on the truth or ignoring the truth altogether, then that's unacceptable. That's completely opposed to the Torah. That is not what Hashem wants you to do in this world. And if that's what you are doing, then you are a fraud, to put it very simply. So a Chacham has to speak the truth. He can choose his words carefully. He may sometimes choose not to say certain things in certain forums, in certain contexts. You don't always have to say everything that you think about everything. But to speak that which is not true, that is unacceptable. Very well. We continue. Now, in a society where things are so far gone, then the truth is that those who speak the truth will generally be ignored. And that's what Yirmiyahu experienced throughout his life, essentially. And that's what it says over here in Pasuk Kaf 28. Kulam sorerim holeche rochil nahoshet uvarzel kulam mashhitim hema. In other words, the people generally, there are always exceptions, but the general tone of the society is one of the opposite of truth, the opposite of being upright and honest and moral. That's the opposite of the general tone of those who set the tone of society. And if that's the case, then men of truth will not be listened to. And this is what Yirmiyahu discovered the hard way. And this is what we also see today. The same is true today. How many times one could discuss this about, one could relate to any number of topics, but take, for example, the various statements made by, let's say for now, people from the so-called religious right in Israel, going back decades. How many times did such people say that these policies and these actions, for example, the Oslo agreements, will result in A, B, C, and D? Were they listened to? No, they were ignored. Were they right? We all know that we all see with our eyes that they were right. Only a person who is so far gone that cannot even concede that the reality before his eyes is in fact the reality, only such a person will not admit to this. And unfortunately, the people, what we see here in Sefer Yirmiyahu as well, not only in Sefer Yirmiyahu, is that when the general the public refuse to listen to those who speak the truth because it doesn't suit them, that same public will eventually pay the price. And that is what we see all the time on any number of fronts and any number of issues you choose to mention. This is what we see. For example, we spoke a moment ago about so-called democracy, the facade and the lies of what's known or referred to as the democratic system. Well, that too, people, for whatever reason, have chosen to convince themselves that democracy is the best way to run a society, and this is what we want, this is what we like. Wa'ami ahavu chen, as we said in the pasuk before. But if that's what you choose because you don't want to accept the testimony of your own eyes that it's a terrible system, really, despite how they like to window dress it and present it, then you will pay a terrible price. And that is what all the societies basically nowadays, all Western societies at least, are paying a terrible price. Look at what goes on around the world, not just in Israel. Look what goes on in the UK, the US, and Europe. Are all these countries which are at present being overrun by the Islamo-Nazis, are they not apparently, supposedly democracies? And have those countries, the governments of those countries for decades, is it not clear today that they have acted systematically over decades against the interests of their demos, of their people, the people who put them in power, who voted for them? Clearly they have. So there's a price to pay. And that's inescapable. Kafteth. Nahar Mapuah. This is why, by the way, of course, Yirmiyahu, to a large extent, is a fairly depressing book. It's not calculated to buoy your spirits necessarily, but it is a reality check. And a reality check is a good thing if it wakes you up. So the Kaftet says, Nahar Mapuah, Me'esh Tam Ofareth, Lasho Saraf Sarof Uraim Lo Nitaku. The difficult pasuk. So here the Targum states as follows. It says as follows: Ha kemeshev napehin daharich birawa'a denura. Just like you have the bellows which create a draft, a flow of air into the furnace and onto the flames, onto the coals, in order to increase the temperature. Ken hashar kalahon deneviyaya demith naban lahon tuvu leoraita v'lo tavu. The sound of the voices, the words of the Nevi'im, who constantly tell the people to return to Hashem, are not listened to. Those words are just like air, and they are ignored. Nura ken kura, I should say, ken hawa'a betilin ve'inehon, just like the lead which is inside the furnace, which melts because of the great heat. So the words of the Nevi'im melt. In other words, they're considered bitilim. See the word like davar batil, bitilim b'nehom. People say, well, what they say is not, they're just fanatics. You don't have to listen to these people. Milen v'yaya damitnaban lahon lo lehana'a alifunun malfehon wa'odehen bishaya la shevaku. And the people therefore ignore the words of the Nevi'im, and they do not change their ways in any way. Rashi explains the mashal as follows. This is obviously a mashal. Rashi says, Mashalhu, sorofim kesef, when it is the purpose of the soref, of the artisan who's working with this metal, sorofim kesef, and you wish to purify the silver, nofahim b'mapuah, you use a bellows to increase the flame, the heat. And you add other metals also, because that helps to the process of separation of the impurities. Hashem says, I have come and I've tried to purify you. And the bellows themselves have become damaged and charred by the flames. But the ofereth, the people, you just nothing works, nothing changes. So you are now like silver that is nimas, that is unwanted, because it cannot be purified. In other words, what's the point of having, let's say, iron ore if you cannot turn it into iron, because you cannot separate the impurities? Kimaas Adonai Bahem, Hashem is tired of you, and Hashem therefore has decided that nothing can be done for you. You are beyond hope, which is a terrible thing to hear, but that's the truth. So says Yirmiyahu. And so we go on to Perek Zayin. Hadavar asher haya Yirmiyahu. This is what Yirmiyahu received. Me'ed Adonai lemor. Amod b'sha'ar Beit Adonai. Stand at the entrance to the Mikdash in Yerushalayim. V'karat Hashem et hadavar hazeh, and tell them as follows. V'amarta shim'u davar Adonai kol Yehuda haba'im b'sha'arim ha'ela. Listen, here, all of you people coming here to the Mikdash, to literally to bow down to Hashem. That's lichora what you're coming here to do, correct? We go on to Pasuk Gimel. Ka amar Adonai Tzavaoth Elohei Yisrael, Heitivu darchechem u'ma'alechem. You must do teshuvah, you must change your ways. V'shakana etchem b'makom hazeh, and I will cause you to remain in this place. So this lichora is a slightly different message that they were hearing. We don't know exactly if which parasha came before which. It's not necessarily in purely chronological order. Pasuk Dalet, Al tiftahu lachem, Al divrei hashakar lemor. Do not trust, do not believe the falsehoods that you hear. Namely, Hechal Adonai, Hechal Adonai, Hechal Adonai Hema. In other words, the fact that the pasuk repeats the term 3 times tells you that people believed that if the Mikdash exists within our midst, even though we are behaving as we behave and not following the Torah, then things will be okay, because we have the Mikdash is an insurance policy. And what the Targum says here is as follows. Do not rely on the words of the false prophets. Yirmiyahu didn't mention the word false prophets. He said falsehoods, false statements. But who are making these false statements? Statements don't make themselves. There are, as we've spoken of before, there were plenty of people who said, no, this is not true. Today, the false prophets are journalists and politicians and bureaucrats and all kinds of people, evildoers. Once the people in the relevant class of person who misled the Jewish people were Nevi'ei Sheker. Damarin kadam hechala Adonai atun parahin. Kadam hechala Adonai atun davahin. Kadam hechala Adonai atun sachadin. In other words, the 3 statements, hechala Adonai, hechala Adonai, hechala Adonai, the Targum expands on and says, you are worshipping, this is what the false prophets say, you are worshipping parahin. Kadam hechala Adonai, you are worshipping in the sanctuary of Hashem. Atem davahin, you are bringing sacrifices. Lizboach, kadam haichal Adonai. Atem servadim, and you bow down 3 times. Salat zimnin b'shata, 3 times a year. In other words, the aliyah l'regel. Atun mit hazan kadamo. You come before Hashem in this place. So how can things go wrong? Pasuk. Do not trust in those things. Rather, listen to what I'm telling you. Ki'im hetayvul. If you improve your ways, you change your ways. If you do that which is just and correct. Ben ishu ben ra'ehu. So here Yirmiyahu is referring, first of all, to interpersonal relations and monetary relations. If you deal justly and correctly. And it goes on to say immediately, do not take advantage of and do not oppress financially the ger, the yathom, and the almana. The ger is a stranger who has no family, has no connections, and he can easily be taken advantage of. Yathom is an orphan, an almana is a widow, and such people have no one to fight their cause. Do not spill innocent blood in this place. And do not follow and worship false gods, and all of this only brings upon you disaster. The Radak points out something that we should note. The pasuk says, "Ger yathom almana lo ta'ashoku." Do not oppress, do not take advantage of, do not behave unjustly towards these weak people, the weaker elements of society. Do not spill innocent blood in this place. Only in this place it's asur to spill innocent blood or to behave in such a way. So the Radak says, no, b'makom hazeh b'chol makom hura. Wherever such things are done are terrible. U'b'makom hazeh, and here, in Yerushalayim, in Eretz Yisrael, hu yothera, it is worse. Shahu makom hashechina. In other words, this is what we find in the Torah all the time, that if you do A, B, C, and D, then the land, ha'aretz takiatchem, the land will vomit you out. Correct? In other words, there's a limit to the amount of rish'uth, of ro'a, of evil, and corruption that can be that the land and Hashem can suffer. And the pasuk says, "L'ra lachem." This is all to your detriment. L'ra lachem, atem ra'im. כי לרע לכם הוא הליכתכם אחרי אלוהים אחרים, כי בזמן שאתם עושים זה, אתם נופלים לפני אויביכם. And all this only leads to disaster. When you follow false gods and listen to false prophets, in the end, you will fall by the sword. And if you do this, if you listen to me, what I'm saying to you, then ושכנתי אתכם במקום הזה, בארץ אשר נתתי לאבותיכם, למין עולם ועד עולם. And if you listen and you change your ways, then I will cause you to live in peace in this place, in this land which I gave to your forefathers, min olam wa'ad olam, for all time. And Pasuk Heth says, הנה אתם בוטחים לכם, על דברי השקר, לבלתי הועיל. No, behold, you, all the things that you believe in, הנה אתם בוטחים לכם, על דברי השקר. You are allowing yourself to be led by the nose by those who speak falsely to you, לבלתי הועיל, and it does not help you at all. You may think so, but it does not. הגנוב רצוח ונאוף והיא שובע על השקר וקטר לבעל והלוך אחרי אלוהים אחרים אשר לא ידעתם. You think you can do all these things. You can steal and cheat and lie and commit adultery and swear falsely and follow foreign gods, all of which are worthless. You think you can do all of these things, and then uvathem pasuk yod va'amadtem lefanai, and then you can come to my Bet Mikdash, to my house. B'bayit hazeh asher nikra shemi alo. You can come to this place, which is dedicated to my name. Va'amartem nithalnu, and say to yourselves, we are saved. In other words, it'll be fine. We come here, we bring this korban, and we come here 3 times a year, and we'll be okay. This is what you think. You can do all these abominable things and get away with it because you come to the Mikdash occasionally. If that's what you think, then I'm telling you this is not true. You should know. You are turning my house into a ma'arath parisim, literally a cave of a criminal hideout, where criminals who, let's say, highway robbers, they have hideouts. They have a cave. They have a place where they meet, where they perhaps live some of the time, where they keep their ill-gotten gains. Correct? That's a ma'ara cave, parisim. The word paris, used also by Hazan, refers to criminals, gangsters. That's what the word means. People who are inclined to violence and who threaten violence, etc. These are parisim. You have turned my house into such a place, and you think I don't see. Hine ra'itenu Adonai. No, I see very well. Ki lechu na el mekomi asher b'Shilo. Now, if you don't believe me, go to Shilo, where the Mishkan stood for many years. Asher shikanti shami sham barishona, where the Mishkan was initially established at first when you entered Eretz Yisrael. Uru'et asher asiti lo mipnei ra'at ami Yisrael, and see what I did to it. In other words, it was destroyed because of the evil of my people. What is being referred to? Radak says, go to Shilo. Take note of what happened to the Mishkan in Shilo. She'herafti otho was silakti shechinati mimeno. I destroyed it and removed my shechina from it. V'chala ha'aron mimeno, and the Aron HaBarith. If you recall, the time of the Pelishtim, the time of Elia Kohen, the Aron Barith, which is the center of the Mishkan. Gala ha'aron mimeno was taken. Vaya'im Pelishtim, and was taken. I allowed it to be taken by the Pelishtim. V'lo hashashti lichvodi, and I did not worry about my honor. Aharesh shayu hem mevazim otho, because you also you don't care about my honor. So what is the difference if the Jews disrespect me or the Pelishtim disrespect me? Ken I will do the same here. Lefichach al tiftachu al divrei sheker kaelu. Do not believe in what they say to you, these false prophets and these kohanim, as we saw at the end of the last perek. ושלושת הפסוקים הבאים אחר כך, אחרי זה הפסוק מבוארים הם. And the following psukim are self-evident. So what are the following psukim? ועתה, therefore, יען עשותיכם את כל המעשים האלה נאום אדוני, because of all these things that you have been doing, ואדבר עליכם, and I speak to you, by way of the prophets, obviously. השכם ודבר ולא שמעתם, I speak to you all the time, literally early in the morning and every other time. ולא שמעתם, you don't listen. ויקרא אתכם ולא עניתם, and you do not. I called out to you and you do not answer. ועשיתי לבית אשר נקרא שמי עלו, אשר אתם בוטחים בו, I shall do to this house that you place your faith in, that nothing can happen to you as long as the Mikdash stands. ולמקום אשר נתתי לכם ולאבותיכם, and to this place that I've given to you and your forefathers, כאשר עשיתי לשילה, I will do the same to this place as happened to Shilo. והשלחתי אתכם מעל פניי, and I will scatter you and send you away. כאשר השלחתי את כל אחיכם, את כל זרע Ephraim, as I did to the northern kingdom, זרע Ephraim, in other words, the northern tribes, collectively known as Ephraim, the same will be your lot as theirs. And therefore, Hashem says to Yirmiyahu, وَأَتَى أَلْ تِتْپَلَل بَعَدْ העם הזה. Do not pray to me for this people. وَأَلْ تِسَى بَعْدَمْ رِنَا وَتْفِلَةً. Do not call out to me. Do not supplicate. وَأَلْ تِفْگَعْ بِي כי אינני שומע אותך. Because even if you do, I will not hear you. Do you not see מה הם עושים בערי יהודה, what they do in this land of Yehuda, ובחוצות ירושלים, and in the environs of Yerushalayim? You can see with your own eyes, Habanim melakatim esim, the children are sent to gather firewood, והאבות מבערים את האש, and the fathers light the fires, והנשים לשוף בסק, and the women knead the dough to make types of offerings referred to here as kawanim, la'asot kawanim, limlechet hashamayim. This word limlechet hashamayim requires a little bit of explanation, just a moment. But to worship the heaven, the things in heaven, in other words, false avodah zarah, false worship. V'hasech nusachim lelohim acherim, and they pour out libations to foreign gods. L'ma'an ha'isani. All right. So, what is the meaning of this? Of this word limlechet hashamayim. This is pasuk Yilhef. In the Targum we find as follows: Benaya melakatin ara. The children go out and collect the wood, as we said. Wavhatha madlikin yathnura. The men folk light the fires. Unashaya lishan lisha. The women knead the dough for these various offerings. Lema'ibad kaldotin. Again, it refers to various kinds of cakes or whatever they would make for this avodah zarah. Lichochavat shemaya. Now, the word kochavat shemaya literally means the star in heaven. Ulenasachal naschin lefalhe kochavaya b'dir la'al gaza kadavai, and to make libations, etc., to L'falchei kochavaya, to those who worship various stars. But here is referring to kochavat shemaya, which is in the word kochavaya is in the plural, stars. But the word kochavat shemaya refers to an individual, one star, a particular star. There are those who explain that the Kochavat Shemaya, the singular, the particular star in heaven, refers to the moon. There are those who say that this pasuk is describing a kind of avodah zarah they would do on Rosh Chodesh for the new moon. And some say not for the new moon, but for the full moon, when the moon is more impressive when it's full, obviously. And there are those who explain it in this way. The Shadal refers to these things over here. He says, He says sheken, you can see over here, sheken min hacha goyim lahav'ir esh lifnei betam biyom rosh chodesh. It is the practice of at least some nations and some religions to make a bonfire in front of their house on Rosh Chodesh. Talks here about lagdil et hamedura ulamshicha zman rav, and that is why they sent out the children to get firewood, so to build a large fire that would last a long time. And then, with regards to limlechet hashamayim, hi alevana. So says the Shadal is referring to the moon, and this could be the pshat, as we don't know for a fact. I, however, have a suspicion based on certain things that I've seen and read that is actually referring to Venus. The Kochvath Shemaya is Venus, the brightest star in the heaven, after the brightest objects in the heavens above us, apart from the sun and the moon. The next brightest body that we can see in the heavens is Venus. When Venus is visible, it's a particularly bright star. Looks like a very bright star. It's obviously, we know it's a planet, and we know why it's very bright, because it's surrounded by clouds which reflect the sunlight. But Venus was a very common and ubiquitous form of Avodah Zarah. Venus was worshipped by many nations. There are those who say that Athens, the word Athens, the capital of Greece, in Greek, I think originally was Athena. Now, Athena just happens to be the Aramaic word for I have come, Athena, because Atha is to come, to arrive. Athena is I arrive, or I have arrived. And according to some, Venus is a relatively recent addition to our solar system. And that fits the word Athena, means I've arrived. In other words, some new object in the sky which is visible, and various peoples were drawn to worshipping it. So some say that Kochvat Shemaya, which is that's the simple implication of the Targum, because the words Kochvat Shemaya means the star of heaven. In other words, the star, the most bright, the brightest, the most obvious, the most impressive star in heaven. If it was referring to the moon, according to the Targum, then I don't think it would say Kochavat Shemaya. It would say something about the Sehara. Sehara is the moon, or something of that nature. At any rate, it's referring to Avodah Zarah, and it's describing the reality in Mamlechet Yehuda, whereby a majority of the people were involved in such things and believed in such things. This was the fashion. This was the common thing. All the nations around about were worshipping the same kinds of things.
Were the Rabbanim also, many of the Rabbanim involved in this as well?
At that time?
Yeah.
Well,
meaning, did it have a kosher stamp?
Were the Kohan, if you mean to say, were various Kohanim and Nevi'ei Sheker involved in these things? Yes, I think they were. I have very little doubt that they were. We see explicitly, even before the time of Yirmiyahu, that in the Mikdash itself, they were, in the time of Menashe, they were worshipping Avodah Zarah, Mamash, and Yehezkel refers to this as well. So it wasn't just common people who were maybe not terribly clever or not terribly educated or something. No, there was schools of thought and leaders who thought these things and encouraged people to follow these practices. And Hashem says, "Ha'othi hem machisim l'madona." You think you're angering me? Halo otham lema'an boshet panehem. You are only causing trouble to yourselves and embarrassing yourselves. Lema'an boshet panehem. Lachen ka'amar Adonai Elohim hine api v'hamothi nitachet el hamakom hazeh. And therefore my anger and my fury is going to be poured out on this place. Al ha'adam wa al ha'behema, on the man and beast. Wa'al etz ha'sadeh. On everything, on the living and the non-living parts of reality of the world in this land. It shall burn and it shall not be extinguished. Perhaps we'll stop here for today. That again, not a very uplifting or encouraging, but a description of reality at that time, but an accurate description of reality at that time. Again, Yirmiyahu was not trying to be popular, and Hashem warned him at the very outset that you will not be popular, and he was not. And to speak the truth often requires a willingness to be unpopular, not to be accepted, not to be spoken of positively by all sorts of people. Frequently that is the lot of those who speak the truth, and yet it is the truth that eventually wins out. So we shall stop here for today. Ehyeh Baruch. חזקו ויאמץ לבבכם כל המייחלים לאדוני.